Picture the sea east of nowhere, the water so dark and so blue at the same time that the old sailors called it wine, as if a god had spilled his cup across the world and never bothered to clean it. Picture a coastline of bare brown hills sliding down into that water, and tucked among them 100 coves where ships could hide and wait. Picture me, younger than I am now, standing on a deck I owned a share of, looking out at the whole Mediterranean and feeling like it belonged to me. Because it did. For a few years, it truly did. I was a Cilician. We were the masters of this sea. Not bandits, not stragglers, not the desperate men you imagine when you hear the word pirate. We were the strongest thing on the water, and the kings of the coast paid us so we would leave their harbors alone. I want you to hold that in your mind before I tell you the rest, because the rest only matters if you understand who we were when it started. We were not afraid of anyone. We had never once needed to be. And one spring we pulled a laughing young Roman out of a little ship, and we charged a fortune to give him back, and he paid it, and he thanked us, and then he came back and killed every man who had touched him. I held that man. I shared my cup with him. I laughed at his jokes for 38 days. He was the most expensive prisoner we ever took, and we paid for him with our lives. We thought we had caught a hostage. We had caught our own executioner, and the strangest part, the part I have turned over every night since, is this: we paid him to wait. To understand how a sea full of killers ended up nailed to crosses by one unarmed boy, you first have to understand how easy it all was for us back then. You think of Rome as the great power of the world, and one day it would be. But in those years Rome was a city tearing itself apart from the inside, and out here on the water it could not protect its own. We raided Roman grain ships and Roman ports and Roman officials, and Rome wrote angry letters and did nothing. We had whole fleets, hundreds of vessels, our own fortified harbors along the Cilician coast. We took senators off their boats and sent word to their families, and the families paid, and the senators went home humbled and quiet. Rome flinched every time it saw our sails on the horizon. So you can see, I hope, why nothing about that young man frightened us. We had ransomed bigger names than his. We had men in our crews who had done this 100 times, who could smell silver on a passenger before the boarding planks went down. Taking him was not a great deed. It was a Tuesday. We did not even think it was a particularly good catch at first. He was young, he was loud, and the ship he traveled on was small. We assumed his people would scrape together a modest sum, and we would be rid of him in a week. That was the first thing he taught us, though we did not know we were being taught. We thought we were the predators and he was the prey, the way it had always been, the way the whole sea was arranged. We could not have known that the arrangement had just quietly reversed, that the man in our hold had already begun in the cold and patient back room of his mind to take us. We measured him in talents of silver. He was measuring us in something else. He was counting faces. It happened in the open water near the island of Pharmacusa, off the coast of Asia Minor, where the sea lanes narrow and a fast ship can run a slow one down before the sun moves a hand's width across the sky. We came on a small vessel carrying a handful of passengers and their servants, and at the center of them stood a Roman of perhaps 25, dressed far too well for the size of his ship. He told us when we asked that his name was Gaius Julius Caesar, that he came from an old family fallen on thin times, and that he was sailing to the island of Rhodes to study the art of speaking under a famous teacher there. A student, a young aristocrat off to polish his vowels. We nearly laughed with relief at how simple it would be. Our captain, a hard man named Tryphon who had been doing this since before I could walk, named the ransom the way he always did, flat and final, the price a man pays for his own skin, 20 talents of silver. It was a serious sum. It was the price of a fine house and the land around it, the price of a man's whole life of work. Most prisoners went pale when they heard it. They wept, or they begged, or they tried to bargain us down to something their families could survive. This one laughed. He laughed in Tryphon's face, an easy, delighted laugh, as if we had told him a clever joke at a dinner he was enjoying. And then he told us, the men holding the swords, that we had insulted him. 20 talents, for him. Did we not know who he was? Did we not understand the dignity of the family whose name he carried? A man of his standing was worth 50 talents at the very least, and to ask for less was to embarrass everyone in the room. He instructed us to raise the price. He corrected our ransom upward, as if he were tutoring slow children in arithmetic. We stood there with the weapons, and he scolded us for undercharging. I have thought about that moment more than any other. At the time, we read it exactly as you would expect us to read it. We thought he was a vain fool, a rich boy so swollen with his own importance that he would rather be expensive than safe. We thought it was the funniest thing we had seen in months, a prisoner haggling his own ransom higher, and we told the story up and down the fleet for laughs. We took the 50 talents, of course we did, and we congratulated ourselves on the easiest profit of the season. We did not stop to ask the only question that mattered, which was why a man would do that. Why a captive would want his captors to remember him as worth a great deal. We did not understand that he was not buying his pride. He was setting our price. For 38 days that young Roman lived among us, and in all that time I never once saw him behave like a man who was afraid. I have held prisoners who prayed and prisoners who plotted and prisoners who simply went gray and silent and waited to be saved or killed. He did none of it. He behaved, from the first hour to the last, like a man who had been placed in temporary command of a slightly disappointing household and meant to make the best of it. He sent most of his people away at once, scattering them to the cities of the coast to gather the 50 talents he had so generously assigned himself, and he kept with him only a physician and 2 body servants. That alone should have unsettled us. A frightened man clings to his own. This one shed them like a general detaching scouts, keeping just enough to attend him and sending the rest to do his work in the world, while he sat in the middle of an armed enemy camp as calm as a man waiting for his bath to be drawn. When he wished to sleep, he sent word out to us that we were being too loud and that we should be quiet so the prisoner could rest. And here is the thing I can barely make you believe: we lowered our voices. The first time it happened, the men thought it was a joke and laughed, and then they saw he meant it, and somehow, without quite deciding to, they hushed. There was something in the easy expectation of the order, the total absence of any doubt that he would be obeyed, that made obeying feel natural and refusing feel strange. He never asked. He told, and men who had cut throats for a living found themselves tiptoeing around a sleeping student because it would have felt rude to wake him. In his waking hours, he made himself the center of everything. He joined our games and threw himself into them with a competitive fire that won the crew over faster than any fear could have. He ate our food and drank from our cups and slapped backs and learned the men's stories. And he wrote. He was always writing, speeches and poems, and when he finished one he would gather whatever audience he could find among us and perform it, the whole thing, with the gestures and the pauses and the rising voice, exactly as he must have meant to perform it one day in Rome. And if we did not applaud, if some weathered killer sat there picking his teeth instead of praising the meter of a Roman verse he could not understand, Caesar would round on the man and call him an illiterate barbarian to his face. He called us savages, simpletons, brutes with no ear for beauty. He insulted us in our own camp, surrounded by our own blades, and somehow it landed not as defiance, but as charm, the affectionate scorn of a clever man for the dull company fate had stuck him with. We were not offended. We were flattered that he bothered. That, too, was a kind of weapon, though we did not feel the edge of it. And every few days, smiling, he made us a promise. It usually came at night, around the fire, with the wine going round and the talk turning easy. He would lean back and look at us with that warm, amused expression, the one that made you feel he liked you, and he would tell us, in the same friendly tone a man uses to recall a good meal, that the moment we set him free he was going to come back. He was going to raise ships and men, hunt us down across this very sea, find us in whatever cove we were hiding in, and nail every single one of us to a cross. And we laughed. God help us, we laughed every time. It became the favorite joke of the whole crew, the highlight of the evening, and men would actually prompt him for it. Go on, Tell us again what you're going to do to us just to hear him say it. He would oblige, embellishing, promising us the finest crosses, the best view, nomming the ones he liked least as the first to go up. The harder we laughed, the more he gave us. We thought it was the wit of a soft boy playing at being hard among real men. We thought it was the bravest, funniest thing. A prisoner threatening his captors with crucifixion as a party trick. I want to be precise about something because it is the whole hinge of the story. He was not raging when he said it. He was not red-faced or shaking or spitting threats the way frightened men do when they want to feel strong. He said it gently. He said it the way you confirm an appointment. And we, who had spent our whole lives reading other men for weakness, mistook the gentleness for the absence of intent. We thought calm meant harmless. We had it exactly backwards, and the sea would teach us the difference, but not yet. Not for a while yet. For now there was only the fire, and the wine, and the laughter, and the boy promising us the crosses we would not stop asking him to describe. The dangerous thing, the truly dangerous thing, is that we came to like him. I need you to understand that because it is where men like us always die. Not in the boarding, not in the fight, in the comfort that comes after, when the enemy stops looking like an enemy. By the second week, some of the younger crew had half forgotten he was a prisoner at all. He was simply Gaius now, the funny Roman, the one who beat you at dice and recited his verses and called you a savage with a grin. Men saved the choice cuts of meat for him. They argued good-naturedly over who had to keep watch on him, not because he was hard to guard, but because guarding him meant missing his company. He had turned a hostage situation into a long, pleasant visit, and we let him, because it was pleasant, and because we were rich men waiting on a fortune and there was nothing to do but wait. I shared my own cup with him more than once. I told him things about my life I had not told men I had sailed with for years. He was easy to talk to in a way that I did not have a word for then and only half have one for now. He made you feel that what you said was interesting, that you yourself were interesting, that of all the brutes on that island you in particular were a man worth knowing. I felt, fool that I was, that we were something like friends. I think most of the crew felt it. He gave each of us that same warm attention, one at a time, and we never compared notes, never noticed that the friend we each thought we had alone was being given to all of us, equally, deliberately, like rations. Because that is what it was. I understand it now in a way I could not then. He was not making friends. He was taking inventory. Every story I told him was a fact about a man he intended to kill. Every name he learned he kept. Every face around that fire he studied until he could have drawn it in the dark. He walked our camp and counted our ships. He learned which coves we favored, how we set our watches, how many men slept where. He let us pour out our lives to him, and he filed every drop of it away. And we thought we were charming a captive, and we were briefing a general. We mistook his courtesy for surrender. That is the cleanest way I can say it. When a strong man is gentle, weak men assume he has given up. We could not conceive of a gentleness that was simply patience, a kindness that was simply a man being careful not to alarm the cattle before the slaughter. He was never once unkind to us, and that should have been the most frightening thing of all. Unkindness would have meant he was reacting to us, that we had some power over his feelings. His perfect, easy warmth meant the opposite. It meant we had already been decided. It meant the verdict was in, and the sentence was set, and there was no longer any reason for him to be anything but pleasant to the dead men keeping him company. I ask myself even now why none of us saw it, and I think the answer is simply that we had never met our match, and so we did not know what one looked like. We knew how to read fear, and there was none. We knew how to read scheming, and he hid it under so much open friendliness that we never thought to look beneath. He showed us a smiling, harmless boy. And because we had no experience of being prey, we believed the disguise completely. We had spent our lives teaching other men to fear the calm before our violence. It never occurred to us that we were sitting inside someone else's calm. Silver came, all 50 talents of it, hauled in from the cities of the coast by the people he had sent ahead. We counted it twice, the way you do with a sum that large, and it was all there, every coin of the ransom he had set on himself. We had never made an easier fortune. We delivered him to the harbor at Miletus, free and unharmed and rich men's worth of trouble safely behind us, and we sent him on his way with something close to fondness. A few of the men actually called out farewells. "Come back and see us, Gaius." He smiled and said he would. And then his feet touched the dock, and the boy we knew was simply gone. I was not there for the moment of it, but the men who were spoke of it for the rest of their short lives, the way the warmth fell off him like a cloak dropped on the ground, the way the easy smile closed into something flat and purposeful. He did not gloat. He did not turn and curse us from the safety of the shore the way a freed prisoner might. He simply stopped performing because the performance was over, because we had paid for the last act and he no longer required an audience. He walked into Miletus a private citizen with no command, no fleet, no legal authority to raise so much as a rowboat against anyone. It did not slow him by a single day. On his own word alone, a freed hostage, a student of rhetoric, a man with no office and no right, he went to the people of Miletus and raised ships. He raised armed men. He gathered a force out of nothing but his own certainty and the borrowed faith of strangers who looked at this young Roman and somehow decided to follow him to sea against the most feared pirates in the world. He had no fleet, so he made one. He had no permission, so he did not ask for it. And the moment the vessels were crewed and provisioned, he turned their prows toward the one place in all that endless sea where he knew exactly what he would find. He pointed them straight back at us, back at the cove where we had laughed at his promise, back to collect. He found us almost exactly where he had left us, and that is the part that still makes me close my eyes. We had not run. Why would we have run? We were rich and pleased with ourselves and busy spending the very silver he had paid us, still anchored in our familiar water, still telling the story of the funny Roman and the crosses he was going to build. Some of the men were drinking to his health when his ships came around the headland. We thought, in the first confused instant, that it was a merchant convoy stumbling into the wrong cove. By the time we understood what we were looking at, by the time we saw the young man standing at the head of the lead ship with that flat new expression on his face, the trap had already closed. There was barely a fight. I will not dress it up into a battle because it was not one. He had come with overwhelming force and total surprise and perfect knowledge of our anchorage. Knowledge we had given him ourselves over the fire, cup by cup, story by story. He knew where our ships lay and how our watches stood and which way we would scatter, because we had told him all of it without ever once being asked. We were boarded and bound before most of us had cleared the sleep and the wine from our heads. The hunters of the whole Mediterranean were taken like fish in a drained pool, and the man taking us did not even raise his voice. He recovered the silver, all of it, the entire 50 talents we had so recently celebrated, plus every other thing we owned, every coin and cargo and vessel we had accumulated in all our profitable years. Do you understand the arithmetic of it? The prisoner we had charged a fortune to release had simply come back and taken the fortune away again, and taken everything else besides, and taken us along with it. We had not robbed him. We had lent him our wealth, kept it warm for him, and waited politely in one place until he was ready to come and reclaim it with interest. The most expensive prisoner we ever took had just made himself the most profitable raid of his entire life, and the raid was us. He took us in chains overland to the city of Pergamon, where he handed us into a prison to be held while he sorted out the formalities, and for a brief moment some of the men let themselves hope. Because there were formalities. Caesar was still a private citizen, and the disposal of prisoners, the justice of it, properly belonged to the Roman governor of the province of Asia, a man named Marcus Junctus. And Junctus, when the matter came before him, did exactly what we prayed he would do. He hesitated. He hesitated because he was a small and greedy man, and because a prison full of wealthy pirates is not a problem to such a man but an opportunity. There was money to be made from us, ransoms to be extracted all over again, or a quiet sale of able bodies to the mines or the markets. Junctus looked at us and saw silver, The way everyone in this story keeps seeing silver, and he told Caesar to wait. He would consider the matter. He would decide our fate at his leisure. Once he had weighed, no doubt, exactly how much each of our lives might be made to yield him. And for a heartbeat we thought the young man's promise might dissolve into that familiar fog of official delay, the way most threats in the world do. We did not yet grasp that we were dealing with someone who did not recognize the difference between a thing he had said and a thing he would do. To Caesar there was no gap there at all. He had told us, over and over, smiling, what would happen. We had laughed and asked to hear it again. As far as he was concerned, the appointment had been made months ago, confirmed nightly by the fire, and a governor's hesitation was not going to break an agreement that we ourselves had so cheerfully helped him rehearse. He did not argue with Junctus. He did not wait for the slow machinery of a greedy man's permission. He simply went on his own authority back to the prison where they were holding us, and there he gave the order that kept every word he had ever spoken to us. Crosses, for all of us, exactly as he had described them by the firelight, exactly as we had begged him to describe them again and again because it was such a wonderful joke. The joke had a date now. The date was today. There is no laughter in a room when the thing you laughed at walks in carrying it. And then he did the one thing I have never been able to fit cleanly into either grief or gratitude, the thing that tells you, more than the crosses ever could, exactly what kind of man we had been keeping company with. Before they raised us up, he remembered that we had treated him well. He remembered the choice cuts of meat and the shared cups and the easy companionship of those 38 days, and he decided that such treatment had earned us a mercy. So he ordered that our throats be cut first, quickly, so that the crosses would only ever have to hold the dead. Think on what that mercy actually was. It was not weakness and it was not warmth, though it wore the shape of both. It was the final, total proof of his control over the whole affair. He was not killing us in rage. A man in a rage forgets to be kind. He was settling an account with such complete composure that he had room, at the very bottom of the ledger, to note a small credit in our favor and pay it out in the only currency the moment allowed, a faster death. He kept the promise to the letter, the cross for every man, and he softened only the part that cost him nothing and proved everything. He could afford to be generous. He had already won so completely that mercy was just another way of showing us how thoroughly he had. I am the one who was left to remember it, and I have spent the rest of a long and quiet life trying to understand how it happened. How the strongest men on the sea were undone by a prisoner who never lifted a weapon against us until the very end. And I keep arriving at the same small, unbearable answer. We were not beaten by his fleet, though his fleet took us. We were not beaten by the governor, though the governor sold us out by his own cowardice. We were beaten, months before any of it, around a fire, by our own inability to tell a joke from a sentence. We had every advantage a man could want. We had the ships and the numbers and the knowledge of the water and the long habit of winning. He had nothing but his own certainty and the patience to let us hand him everything else ourselves. And the difference between us, the only difference that ever mattered, was that when he said a terrible thing in a calm voice, he meant it. And when we heard a terrible thing said in a calm voice, we could not believe that calm and terrible could live in the same man. We thought the smiling ones were safe. We had it precisely, fatally backwards. The smiling ones, the easy ones, the ones who do not need to raise their voices, those are the ones already certain of the ending. The shouting man wants something from you. The calm man has already decided. So here is what I would tell you, you who are listening, you who have surely at some point in your life had someone weaker than you make a promise you found funny. The sea is full of the bones of men who laughed at the quiet ones. It is the most common death out here, more common than storms, more common than drowning, the slow, comfortable death that begins the moment you decide that the person in front of you is harmless because they are pleasant, because they are young, because they are in your power and have not yet shown you any reason to be afraid. That decision is the trap. The harmlessness is the bait. And we swam straight into it laughing, and we paid him 50 talents for the privilege. And we kept him fed and rested and entertained right up until the day he came back and collected. Underestimation is the one debt the sea always collects. It does not forgive it, it does not forget it, and it does not let you settle it for less than the full amount. We owed it from the first hour, from the moment Gaius Julius Caesar laughed at our ransom and told us to charge him more. We just did not know the account had been opened. He knew. He had been keeping the books the whole time, by the fire in the dark, behind that warm and ruinous smile. And when the day came to balance them, he closed every line to the last coin and the last man, and granted us, out of the bottomless reserves of a man who never once doubted how it would end, the small mercy of a quick death beneath the crosses he had promised us all along.